Welcome, Talent Connect 2014. When I saw the high ceilings in here, I asked our events team if I could have like a t-shirt cannon to kick things off. They didn't trust my aim, for one. The other one, they said, we're in San Francisco this year. Let's keep it classy. You know. I'm Matt G., one of the two Matts you're going to be hearing from today. I've been doing research and analytics for LinkedIn for about 5 years now. And the majority of my work begins by grouping professionals on LinkedIn by common characteristics. Characteristics like what they do, who they work for, whether they recently left a job or were promoted. And we call these groups, as you know, talent pools. I've probably built hundreds of talent pools over the past couple of years, and I'm happy to share some of my insights that I picked up along the way. I'm also happy to share the stage with the other Matt, or I'm probably the other Matt in the situation, Matt Hill from Qualcomm.
Hi everybody, Matt Hill here. I lead up sourcing and talent marketing for Qualcomm. We are a mobile semiconductor and technology company based in San Diego. And really happy to be here because I feel like my team really kind of lives at this intersection of supply and demand and kind of hangs out by the talent pool every day. And it just came to me. I think coming up with nicknames might be one of my superpowers, and I think I just came up with one for you, Matt. Because we can't both be Matt up here, right? So I figured, I think Gru is a good nickname, and I'm going to ask if you can maybe do the rest of your presentation in the Gru voice from Despicable Me.
I can try. Didn't see that one coming, but
yeah.
Maybe.
But this stuff for me is really real. As Rebecca, who's sitting in the room, knows. I just moved to Sydney about 4 months ago, and right before I moved, the head of engineering for that office actually asked us to do a talent pool survey of research software talent in Australia. He had an idea that it might be actually easier to find research software engineers in Sydney, who are based in Sydney, as opposed to trying to hire research software engineers to go and work in San Diego. In San Diego, we've got a lot of good tech talent, but we also have to relocate a lot of our tech talent. And so that's exactly what we did. We went out, we did a pretty serious survey. Our team, as well as our talent analytics team, we looked at things like overall supply, universities, publications, and as well as a bunch of internal demographic data to really figure out if, in fact, his hypothesis was true, that you could actually get access to a good supply of talent in Sydney without having to relocate everyone, as opposed to having to do the same thing in San Diego. And so we did that, and actually turned out to support the hypothesis. There was actually a good population, and now he's using that data point every day as he talks to his management and his finance folks about potentially expanding the office in Sydney and the relative cost between there and San Diego. And so let's see here. I'm not a big selfie person here, but this is a data talk, right? It's getting towards the end of the first day. You guys have been, it's our third session. We're getting ready to get together and do some socializing. So I had an idea, and I think we got enough people in here. Instead of the whole selfie thing, right? If you've been to a couple Talent Connects, that's been done, right? People have done the selfie thing. And so we're not going to do that, but what we're going to do instead is, since we're in a pool, we're in kind of an aquatic theme here, what we're going to do is we're going to do a wave. And you guys are all going to be part of it. It's going to be a talent pool tsunami, all right? And I'm going to take video of it. And later on, I am going to post it to YouTube. And I'm going to throw the old hashtag #AnTalent on there, tweet it out for you guys. What do you guys think? You guys think you can put your drinks down for a second, not spill your coffee, and maybe get a good? I see some likely people over here. I think I know where we're going to start. We're going to start right over here.
They're getting ready over there.
All right, and we're going to go all the way down, and then we're going to go all the way back. So basically, you stand up, you put your hands up, we go all the way this way, you sit down, and then we'll start again from this way all the way back. All right, guys, this is your time to shine. This is your 1 second of Talent Connect 2014 fame. All right, I'm going to count off to 3, all right? 1, 2, 3.
Nice,
all right, and let's get it back here. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. How'd that feel, everybody? Yeah, awesome.
I was definitely not expecting that level of participation in the wave. So, well done. So what Matt and I are going to do today is share some tips with you on how you can collect and analyze data about the talent pools that you care about. How you can, we're going to share some higher level insights on talent pools across LinkedIn, and we'll make a special announcement on some new tools that you can use. Before we dive in, let's talk about the two main concepts that underpin every talent pool analysis that we do. Those are the concepts of supply and demand. These are two massive competing market forces that swing back and forth over time. Supply, when supply is winning, you have a buyer's market. When demand is winning, you have a seller's market. Based on the worried look on supply's face here, I think a seller's market is coming soon. But what does supply and demand mean for you and your business? How can you beat supply and demand? Well, the good news is that supply and demand are these massive market forces, but they're also made up of all the small choices that you and I make every day. Take, for example, how you got to the Moscone Center today. So how many people drove today into the city? All right, wow, that is much lower than I thought, so that's like 5%. So if you're driving, something like this would be useful information, right? And let's suppose this is the first time you're ever coming into San Francisco. You just got off your plane down at SFO at the bottom of the map there, and you were trying to get to Moscone Center at the top. You'd see this freeway, 101, that connects the two. And you'd say, hey, it looks like there's about a 15-mile gap there. It might take me 15 to 20 minutes to get into the city. All right, I didn't even have to lead in there. That's nice. Traffic is probably the most visible example of supply and demand that's out there. There's a fixed amount of roadway and a varying number of people who are competing for that space. So if we go back to our map, it was useful, especially if you've never been to San Francisco before. It shows you the route, but how could it have been better? It could have been like this. It could have shown you, I know it's not good news, it could have shown you the number of people, drivers, that are competing for the space on the roadway right now. Putting supply and demand on the same map helps drivers make better routing decisions. You might decide to take 280 or 380, or on a day like this, you might just say, I'm just going to stay on 101, and this is going to be a miserable commute. But the market for talent is no different. But instead of going from point A to point B and avoiding traffic in between, TA professionals start with an open seat, avoid shortages of talent supply in between to get to new hires. Data can help you navigate that path. And talent pools, collecting talent pools and the data around talent pools can help be talent GPS, a roadmap to qualified candidates and to help you make better data-driven decisions, pun intended there. So you can't always avoid traffic or talent traffic, but at least you can tell the hiring manager, it's looking pretty rough out here, I may be late for dinner. So today, the next time that you're confronted with a talent pool, we're going to give you some tools and some stuff that you can use to set your talent destination, map the demand and supply for talent, and explore some alternate routes. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who's going to tell you about a talent pool that is core to his business and challenging at times.
All right, so some of you guys might be thinking, is this some sort of bait and switch? Right? They talked about talent pools, and now they're talking about talent GPS, and we're just trying to be a little bit more, we're trying to kind of mix these two metaphors together, and I think it was one of Matt's brilliant ideas for this, but I think it's actually a really good kind of metaphorical shift, and so we're going to get into that. But since I'm the anecdote guy today, I'm gonna, it makes me think also of something just came up in the news. In Australia, they actually have recently outfitted a bunch of sharks with GPS transceivers, I think they're satellite transceivers. And so this is a good idea, right, for a lot of reasons. But what they actually do is they have them set up, and so once a shark actually gets to within a couple kilometers of a beach, this thing will automatically tweet the location of itself to the beachgoers into account, so people back at the beach can actually check it out, right? And so it's a pretty useful way of seeing what kind of talent is out there in a pretty real-time way. And so speaking of real-time and speaking of topical, I thought we'd actually do an example that was pretty topical. Does anyone know what the big announcement of the day was today from a technology perspective? What just rolled out today? Apple Pay, right? So anyone know what the underlying hardware that makes Apple Pay work is? So it's something called near field communications. It's NFC, and so I thought, since it's a big, it's a big announcement, it's a big day for NFC, in that Apple can many times kind of shift the market and shift the demand for a certain market. And Qualcomm's been working in NFC for some time now. It's been a feature of a lot of Android phones for a while. I thought we would actually get a real-life example of near-field communications talent, NFC talent, And because a lot of our customers are mobile device manufacturers in Asia, we're going to basically further stipulate that we think that we should probably put some of this talent closer to our customers in Asia, and specifically the Asia Pacific region. And for Qualcomm, pretty much all the time, it's always going to be technical talent and engineering talent first. So we're actually going to give some practical examples of how to really set that destination. And of course, a destination is never fixed, right? You look at a place that you want to go, and the closer you get to that destination might change, right? Or you might decide to go somewhere else. So of course, there's never one final destination, and there's always a zigzagging path to get there. But let's start off on that zigzagging path. And how would we actually start? What questions might we ask in the beginning to kind of start getting our bearings, to at least, plug in our current location in the GPS, or maybe pull out the old, Rand McNally rolled atlas, if any of you guys were from the pre-GPS days, which is when I learned to drive. I know it's hard to even imagine that. But so some of the questions you might ask, or some of the questions you might start looking into. So what current or past Qualcomm employees actually fit the profile, right? Kind of starting to go on that triangulation path, right? What are some of the, how can I kind of find the 3 points around at least my initial destination to actually help me figure that out? And I think, a lot of you guys and girls who are sourcers out there have had that experience of going into LinkedIn or your own ATS and doing a search and, refining it to the point where all of a sudden in the first couple of pages of results, you see the hiring manager, you see the whole hiring team, and you're probably on a pretty good path, right? So that's a really good thing to do and a good way to kind of mine those profiles for some additional keywords and other skills and that kind of thing, which helps you answer what skills and areas of expertise are required to be successful. And then also which employers are well known in this space. And if you're like me and you're new to NFC and it's a new kind of big hype thing, that's actually probably one of the most important questions. So how do we go about doing this? How would we actually go about doing some simple searches in Recruiter to actually generate basically a map of where we are today in terms of talent? Pretty easy. I think most of you probably know this magic little box. And so we're going to start out with a big kind of broad swath. We're just going to put in NFC. That's the standard initialization for near-field communications. Let's do a quick search here and see what comes up. We might have some random organizations that might also share the same name. So we get some false positives in there. So let's further refine. Okay, well, we also use a little custom filter on the left-hand side. We just put in the major Asia-Pacific countries: Singapore, China, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Hong Kong, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand. And we started to get some people in there. But you know what? Let's refine a little bit more because I think we got some people who work at a company called NFC something or other. So we put in mobile or payments. Those are basically the factors that will really help us dig deep and make sure that we've got a pretty good percentage of right signals. And so we start getting that first signal, right? So in Asia Pacific, people who work in NFC with mobile or payments. So we know that this is the right group. How many people would you say kind of fit that overall pool? Like what size pool are we working with? Have we got a pool? Do we got an ocean? Do we have a fine mist of dew? What do you guys think? Come on. Water park, sweet. All right. It is a water park in a way. All right. So with this set of this very dialed in Boolean search, I noticed you guys are not in Glenn Cathy's presentation, so I take it you guys are already all sourcing ninjas, so awesome. Don't rush the stage. I don't think we can take all of you guys at once. 2,400. So, it's not a lot, it's not a ton, but we know that we've dialed in a pretty new area of technology and a fairly delineated geographical market. And so we got 2,400. So let's actually now start to so now we know what our destination is. Let's start to actually build that map. Let's see what the different kind of, markers are along the way from there. And so really easily, right? You see in the facets on the left-hand side of the search, basically what I did is I just went through the facets and I just grabbed them, threw them into Excel, and just charted them out just so I could actually see and get a sense for kind of the relative magnitude of these things. And so we started to see some companies, and what's another good way of figuring out these companies besides doing a LinkedIn recruiter search? It's going and talking to your strategy folks, your competitive analysis folks, and just getting their list of companies, right? I mean, that's a good list. It's also already been validated by the company, and so you know where to start. And then if you can match that to this, and if they look like they overlap, really, really closely, then you might be onto something. And so apologies if anyone at any of these companies is here in the audience. They're all big, and so there's probably at least a couple, so I'm not picking on anyone. This is just interesting to me, and I haven't actually gone after any of your people for this, so don't be mad. But here we see some interesting things, right? We see Gemalto and Oberthur, which I think are basically big platform companies that have been doing this stuff for a while, so kind of academy companies in mobile payments. A couple of our customers, Samsung, Sony, and a couple of our direct competitors, NXP, Intel, and also a couple of payments companies, MasterCard and Visa. And besides just looking at current companies, you can also look at past companies. And if there's overlap there, then that means that the same companies are doing the same thing. But if they're very different, you get to start to get a sense of the trends, right, and how things are shifting. If they're shifting rapidly, if they're shifting in a deep way or not. And then country. So we used a filter of all these different countries. And so what do we see? We see pretty clearly that Singapore is up there. But if you spend a lot of time looking at candidates on LinkedIn in China and Taiwan, and even in Japan to a certain extent, and definitely Korea, you know that there's not a ton of profiles that are really complete. And so even seeing this many in comparison to Singapore, which is a pretty social media friendly country, you see actually there's some interesting spots here, right? And probably a lot of different places where we might be able to build this kind of a capability, right? And so in each of these, of course, we could do a deep dive, right? What kind of talent in Singapore? What kind of talent in China? Is it relatively engineering focused or business focused? And if you kind of close your eyes and think about all the facets in a recruiter search, there's a ton of other things there too, right? There's functional expertise, right? Engineering versus IT versus marketing. So is there enough of these different kinds of skills in the relative volumes that you need to actually build a business? There's even things like seniority, right? You can see the kind of the curve of seniority. Is it mostly entry-level people you might expect for this? Are there a bunch of senior-level folks? Is it kind of a nice bell curve or not? So we're starting to get a pretty good sense here, right? We basically took just an initial hypothesis, and we've already built out a pretty good case for where we would probably go to our management and say, hey, let's at least start digging deeper and doing some serious research into some of these areas, Singapore specifically, and probably some others. And then, of course, as with any body of water in a talent pool or talent water park, you need some fresh water going into it over time. It gets stagnant. And so you also want to look at where are the grads coming from. And in this case, National University of Singapore, Nanyang are both in Singapore. You see a couple from Taiwan, a couple from Korea as well, and from China. So you see that there is kind of a sustainable supply of this talent. It's not something that's going away. It's something that seems like it's on the upswing as well. So you're starting to get a really good sense of basically where it is today, where it has been, kind of all the different trends and movements that are out there today.
All right. So Matt's team has done a phenomenal job collecting all this data from Recruiter, using it for to inform their strategy. And there's more data from Recruiter that you can actually pull in. But LinkedIn is dedicated to making this easier. So we know that it's a common use case to do this. So who's ever done talent pool sizing in Recruiter? All right. So it's a common use case, and again, we're dedicated to making it easier. So tomorrow, you may hear, through a variety of ways, but one of those ways tomorrow you may hear a new way that you can use that. We'll get a new announcement. You didn't hear that from me in the keynote tomorrow. And then the other way is through distributing talent pool reports, right? So we've done this in past years. Who has ever used a talent pool report from LinkedIn? All right, a couple people. Hopefully that'll be more after today. They've always been well received, and even after all the data that Matt's group has collected on Recruiter, what you don't get out of Recruiter is you get the supply numbers, but not necessarily the demand numbers. So when we generate a talent pool report, you get to see demand and some other stats from these high-level audiences. But in the past, they've always been it's always a manual process to create these reports. So we've done about 10 to 15 in the past couple of years. Again, we've always gotten positive feedback, but the question mostly after someone sees one of these reports is, great, this software engineering report is phenomenal. Do you have one for APAC? True story, the first time I met Matt was actually at Talent Connect. He said, great, this hardware engineer talent report is awesome. Do you have one for semiconductors? Right, so the Insights team and I stepped back and said, how can we make our impact bigger at next year's Talent Connect? How can we help more of our customers to use supply and demand at the same time and do this sizing? So I thought, I had an idea, right? We had 10 last year. Let's hire some interns and lock them in a room, throw some food underneath the door, and just let them pound away on the keys there. Maybe they get to 100 talent pools. That'd be great. We'd be 10xing our impact. Fortunately, there are a lot of smart people on my team who wouldn't let me do that, and they're all in the back there. 3 of them, Anil, Ryan, and Jenny, said, let's let the machines do the work. Let's see what we can do there. So, without further ado, today, we let those machines generate all the reports over the past couple weeks. They've been churning away. Today, I'm happy to announce that you will have access to 4,683 talent pool reports for different audiences. Yeah, round of applause. So you get a talent pool report, and you get a talent pool report. Everybody gets talent pool reports. It's just as good as cars, right?
You do an awesome Oprah.
Yeah, me and Oprah, exactly the same. So, all right, how did we get there? We crossed all of the groupings of expertise on LinkedIn with all the regions. So we have thousands of expertise, skill sets, occupations, and then again, crossing that with the hundreds of regions on LinkedIn. You get a wide variety of reports, everywhere from 3D artists to ASIC engineers, which is one that's interesting to Matt and his NFC group, all the way down to yoga instructors in the United States. I really wanted to say A to Z. We didn't have enough zookeepers on LinkedIn, so we ended up with that. For a very common, standardized function like sales, there are over 200 reports in there, right? So you can have sales managers, retail salespeople in Portugal, in Spain, in Latin America. And these are all available today. So what now, right? You've got all the data you've gotten out of Recruiter. You got access now, as of 30 seconds ago, to 4,700 talent pool reports. How are you going to take that information and then really map and estimate how long it's going to take you to get your talent destination? Let's take an example. Let's say that you track internal metrics, and one of those metrics is time to fill, right? And you are commonly recruiting software developers out of New York City, but you want to start recruiting them out of Chicago. Looking here, your internal data tells you that it's taking you about 51 days to get to that hire in New York. If you pull up the software developer talent pool report that's available today, you'd see that New York City has about 90,000 software developers, but it only has moderate demand. So what you've been, the pool that you've been playing in is actually not as competitive as the new pool that you're going to go into, which is Chicago, right? So seeing that comparison, that's the crux of this. The same goes for your other hiring metrics, right? So if you track internally how many candidates, offers, screens and phone screens that you do for a particular candidate to get to one new hire, those numbers are going to shift as well when you're going from New York to Chicago. Maybe you have half as many candidates at the top of the funnel. It's going to take you a lot more work. One thing is going to have to give, right? So whether that's quality, cost, or time, and you're going to have that conversation with the hiring manager, and ideally they're not going to say quality, right? So maybe you get higher budget or more time to fill a request. If there's one thing to take away today, it's that this data that we're providing craves content. So you've got the recruiter data, the talent pool data, but that only has value if you take your past experience and your internal data and the feedback from the hiring manager and triangulate it all to try to figure out what that path is going to be to the candidates that you're hiring, right? So otherwise, they're just numbers in space. So with that, because they're just numbers in space, and we want to start to flex those muscles of talent pool sizing, we're going to go through what we found from across these almost 5,000 reports, go through the metrics that we're providing, and how they can inform your strategy. So let's start off with just the most simple at the top there, is just total number of professionals in the talent pool, right? So for this one, this is actually ASIC engineers, which is useful to Matt and adjacent to his NFC population. You have about 14,000 members in APAC right now for this talent pool. He can compare and contrast that with his NFC account and say, hey, I got 20, I don't have to speak for Matt. He got 2,400 people for NFC in that same region. How does that compare? Is he maybe missing out on people? How close, or what should that ratio be between NFC and ASIC engineers. And then if you zoom out across all these talent pools, it's interesting to look at what's that supply number across a bunch of different regions and countries. So we've got the biggest talent pools in these regions at the top and the actual countries that fit them at the bottom. Take a guess, try to think for yourself how will these match up? Any guesses on salesperson? So I heard some US out there. It's actually Australia has the most salespeople. So there were 22 countries or regions where salesperson was the biggest talent pool. India was the only one with a highly technical talent pool that wasn't broad. It's actually software engineers. There are 1.2 million software engineers in India. It's kind of amazing. The other takeaway I had here was business owners as the biggest in the US, Canada, and probably eight other countries. It's typically an audience that I don't really, when I'm doing talent pools or doing analysis, I typically ignore business owners, but it's interesting to look through their profiles and see that business ownership can be something they do on the side, right? And we know that a lot of businesses fail, unfortunately. So maybe some of these, if you've been overlooking this group, you could bring them in as entrepreneurs.
Good signal for entrepreneurial fervor as well, right?
Yeah.
So maybe if you're selling things to entrepreneurs, it might even be another good signal.
There we go. So we'll do another talent flexing opportunity here. We've got 4 talent pools on the right, and then 4 groups of supply, or the supply numbers that match up. If there's another takeaway I want you to have from this presentation, it's this, that there are 10,000 Swedish chefs on LinkedIn. No lie. I randomly was browsing through our talent pools and found that.
Crushes NFC.
That's right. For the other ones, so graphic designer is 500,000 in the US. Nurses, nurses or architects is 100,000. All right, yep, you're right. There you go. You guys are already getting into it. All right, so the second of our metrics here. The second one that we pull out and highlight for you are the number of graduates that have joined this talent pool in the last 3 years. So Matt touched on this a little bit in what he was talking about with schools, but this can help you understand with this talent pool, how much effort should you be putting towards your university recruiting strategy for this talent pool, right? So in this case, we're giving you the number 3.1 thousand, but if you look overall among civil and site engineers, it's about 11%, right? That range, or that difference, so that's just a number in space, but again, if you put that in context with other positions and other occupations, you start to understand where you should really be putting your resources for a particular audience. So here we've got another matching.
What's a good percentage, Matt?
It's a great question. Actually, Matt hasn't seen any of these, so I was going to let Matt guess how these match up. You can guess too. So Matt, what's the low?
All right. I take hints from the audience as well, but I'm going to say 1% future looking is, I'm going to go with letter carrier.
All right, there you go. You are correct.
All right.
So then the average. Oh.
Nice. All right, thanks for helping me out. I didn't really know the next
fault.
answer anyway. All right, so now we're down to associate software engineers in India and Java developers in Spain. I'm going to say Java developers in Spain for 22%.
There you go. Well done. And then software engineers in India. Now again, that's an entry-level role, but almost 50% of that talent pool is coming in from our recent grads, right? All right, moving on. Another metric that you'll get from our talent pools is turnover, right? So how can this be useful? Again, if a very small percentage of the talent pool is turning over every year, it's harder and harder for you to get them and pull them away from their company. So that can help inform, on top of everything else that we've shown, if you're looking at supply and demand, the supply is going to be lower if the turnover number is lower. So here we've got some more matching, just in a different format, just trying to mix it up a little bit. Matt, I'll let you have the first guess here. Brand ambassadors, which I wasn't familiar with until I pulled this. Brand ambassadors are like feet on the ground marketing, really a lot of short-term gigs.
I think they're all actually right across the way right now in the talent marketing get together. High turnover. So I'm going with high turnover first.
All right.
I'm going to say, brand ambassador, yep.
Okay.
I'm going to say electrical engineers are high turnover.
Electrical engineers are actually low turnover. So brand ambassador was 47% turnover in 1 year. Electrical engineers hover down in the range in India, hover down in the range of 3%.
Yep, I would have guessed that one.
There you go. And marketing managers, I got an itchy trigger finger here, Matt. Marketing
managers high turnover then.
No, they're actually right in the middle. They're average. That was a trick question. I'm sorry.
Never do an unscripted deal during these things.
Exactly.
It doesn't work.
And never do it with someone who doesn't know when to click the button. All right, we're getting there. So on the back page of your talent pool reports, you'll see we have top schools and top fields of study. Matt's already touched on the schools again, but what we're looking for here are surprises, right? So you've got a docket of schools that you're going after. You can use these reports to say, hey, are there some schools that we may be missing? I pulled out one talent pool, business intelligence consultants, that I thought was interesting. I looked at the top schools attended by that audience, and it's a pretty big audience. These are business BI consultants in the US. It turns out the top 2 schools are in India. Now they're big schools, so this is absolutes, but an interesting takeaway. So that's obviously going to change your strategy if you're recruiting this audience. So now we get to the meat, right? What everyone's looking forward to, the regional supply and demand numbers, where we plot supply for each metro within a country versus that demand in that same metro. You can compare and contrast the two. This is really where you're mapping supply. It's like having your iPhone telling you it's going to be 20 minutes to get from SFO up to Moscone. On a really good day, probably at like midnight or something.
And this is one I really like too, because I think we've all run into these issues before, right? Especially if you work in a company that has a couple of different centers. And I think Mike and Fernando over there in the corner know this very well. One example of this for us that's extremely important that we run into every day and that we've been talking about for years is the supply of CPU talent in Raleigh, in RTP, as opposed to in Austin, right? We've been recruiting in RTP for some time. We think that we've pretty much plumbed the depths of RTP, and now we're in the cycle of having to relocate a lot of people there. And we've been saying, hey, let's go to Austin, and we'll have a much easier time of doing this. And we've been saying it for years, and I think that they're finally starting to listen to us, right? So if you keep knocking at that door, eventually they'll listen, and especially if you have something like this in your back pocket.
And a lot of clients have used this not only for just approaching a talent pool from a recruitment standpoint, but also where are we going to locate a new office, right? Are there enough people if we're going to go into this space? And sometimes we've had both happen, where a client will either not go into a space because of the talent pool report, or decide, yeah, that's the right call to go into that region. So again, zooming out, supply and demand. Let's look at the US cities most likely among these 4,683 talent pools to have low demand. So this means they're big enough that they have supply. They're in the top 10 list for that occupation, but low enough demand where, again, there's an opportunity there. And for demand, we're using, as a proxy, in-mail sent per person from TA professionals. Portland, Oregon, number 5. So again, if anyone on your team is recruiting in these areas, you can tell them they've got their work is easier than yours is. Salt Lake City, again, another hidden gem. Las Vegas, our host from the past couple years for Talent Connect. Jacksonville, and Norfolk, Virginia. Anyone recruiting in Norfolk, Virginia? All right, we had a couple. There we go. So now let's go to the other side. You'll probably be more familiar with these cities, and you can probably guess which ones. Anyone want to throw out a city? Houston. All right.
We need that
Not
T-shirt.
bad.
We need
Not
that
bad.
T-shirt cannon.
Yeah, I know, right?
What bam?
I'd probably injure people if I did. Houston, well done. The oil and gas industry, obviously, there's a lot of demand there for people in Houston. For Boston, so again, related to where a lot of students are coming out of with high-tech skills. Number 3, anybody? San Francisco, maybe later. This is New York City. So I was actually a little surprised by that. Number 2, Chicago. I thought they would be further down the list.
Who's got number 1? Oh yeah.
Again, totally itchy trigger finger there. So SF, we know that it's in high demand. What I was most surprised of is that across all the talent pools, every occupation, every region, Java development in San Francisco is the most in demand across every single thing. So if you are hunting Java developers right now, you have your work cut out for you. Among the other top 5 most competitive roles within San Francisco, so we have skill sets and occupations. Anyone with Perl, Python, Ruby skills, database management and software skills, web programming skills, or from a title standpoint, senior software engineers. On the flip side, if you have any candidates, or if I were a candidate who had these skills, I would make sure to put them on my profile. New York City is competitive, but it's not competitive for all roles. So when you flip it and you look at which are the roles that are that they're in low competition for, I thought this was interesting. Cashiers, ministers, realtors, psychologists, and actors. So that means there's a lot of them, but there's not that much demand for them.
Has anyone ever worked for a company that actually made a decision to base their operations somewhere where they wouldn't be in a kind of a high kind of turnover, high talent risk area? Can anyone just shout out kind of where that was and what kind of talent pool that was for? No? Yeah, it's probably a secret, but I'll share.
Don't want to give away their secrets.
I'll go. So I used to work for a company called Trilogy in Austin, and they made a very conscious decision not to go to the Bay and not to go to the Northeast because they thought that they could basically build a good software company where people weren't getting poached every day in the middle in Austin. And this was a while back, so today it's probably not the same thing, but they made that decision. It was a very kind of strategic decision for them. They thought there was enough of a pool in Austin and that people would want to stay in Austin because of the lifestyle there. And that worked for them for a while. And then they hired me to basically figure out how to basically hire their first team in China. And so we were talking, and so I said to them, are you guys going to try to find the Austin of China? Because I'm not really sure where that is. But eventually, if anyone here knows China, they actually ended up settling in Hangzhou, China, which is kind of like a big lake town. It's got some similarities. It's got a pretty young population, kind of a good lifestyle compared to Beijing or Shanghai. So they actually used the same thing. And then of course they went to Bangalore for their India push, so they didn't stay true to that. And so when they came full circle and decided to go China, they decided to go for Hangzhou in China, which is if anyone here knows China, that's not exactly an easy place to recruit people to. And I'm not sure exactly how long-term successful that was, but that's what they did.
But we have some data on how hard it is.
Yep.
Not today. So this is our last data exercise for the day of flexing the muscles again. Countries that are most likely to have low demand, right? So any guesses here? Philippines, I can tell you is number 5. Portugal, 4. Mexico, Indonesia, and any guess on number 1? Spain. They were top 10. Greece? No, Greece and Italy didn't make it. I was surprised by that. It's actually Brazil. So again, they have enough supply, but not as much demand as other countries. And the final, what I would call the group of death, these are the countries where if you're recruiting, you've got your work cut out for you. Czech Republic surprised me. Anybody, does that resonate with anybody here? Czech Republic? All right, there we go. We got another one in the area coming up. So UK is number 4. US, obviously because of all the cities we just went through before. Poland, that one really surprised me. So both Poland and the Czech Republic. And then Japan is number 1. So again, you got your work cut out for you here. So hopefully we've given you some information, some tools. We've given you 4,700 reports that you can use to try to map and get a sense for how long it's going to take you to get to that talent destination. We put it as a bonus slid into the back of the talent pool reports. This next step, which gets in more into the mindset of candidates, not necessarily just talent pool sizing. It's a little outside the scope of our presentation today. I wanted to leave you with a couple things to think about. Again, on the back, so we do a survey called the Talent Driver Survey. We do it among 300,000 professionals twice a year. So it's a massive B2B survey. And one of the questions, among others, that we asked is, for those people in the talent pool, what do they want most in a job? And compensation always comes up as number 1. But what's interesting is when you put the countries and occupations next to each other, what kind of surfaces there? So money is most important to people in these countries. If you're recruiting in those countries, it's table stakes. You have to have that requisite amount of compensation. Otherwise, it's going to be a deal breaker. What do you think are some of the countries that are on the other list where they're the lowest value of compensation? UK? All right. What's that? Australia. Close. It's actually the Nordics. Almost all the Nordics are on this list. They've gotten to that higher elevation, don't care as much about money, they like the finer things in life. Also, Czech Republic in there, and Slovenia. So interesting things happening there where there's a lot of competition, but they value different things. Same for if we move to occupations. SAP specialists in LATAM. People in the Philippines like software developers, marketing specialists, again, it's going to be a deal breaker if you don't have money for them. And then rounding out the top 5, personal bankers in the US, no surprise there. On the other side, again, not too surprising, is that the roles and occupations there that are more altruistic, I would say, they're on the list on the other side. So teachers, graphic designers in Australia actually surprised me a little bit, and social workers. So, this is getting more into the mindset of the candidate. This is more, once you have your talent pool established, you know how long it's going to take you to get there, generally. What can you start to fish in that talent pool, right? And another metric that you can use is the talent brand index. This is something that, if you look at it by function, you can get a sense for what the affinity is for your company from that audience, another guidepost that you can use. And also, and Matt mentioned this before, talent flows, right? So looking at each company, which talent is going from your company to others and from others to yours. And when you get that list of companies that he showed in his slides, you can start to predict how likely it's going to be that someone's going to move from another company to your company. Another measurement of success. So how tough is it going to be?
And just to roll back one, I mean, the back of the talent pool report, it had basically those, what were they called, the motivating factors, or what was the?
Talent drivers.
Talent drivers. So a lot of you guys probably went to the EVP, one or two of the employment value proposition presentations earlier, and that's what they're getting at, right? They're getting at the EVP for a broad talent pool. And it's kind of interesting, kind of a different way also to think about talent supply and demand is that, you can pretty easily tell what the supply is these days, right? I mean, that's not the hard thing anymore, is the supply. And this is actually the demand, but it's the demand of the actual candidates, right? Which we actually as recruiters have to take into account as well, right? So not just the demand of your company or your hiring managers, but actually mapping the supply. If you want to get that supply, you actually have to match that with what they're demanding and kind of overlap those two things. So that's another kind of interesting and maybe kind of next level way to look at this stuff as well.
That's right. And when I look at these, some of the last metrics we have here, I just look for spikes, right? So you look for, if there's a company here that's off the charts, you're having an easy time drawing talent away from that company, that's an opportunity. Same for the talent brand index, right? If there's a particular function that has a strong affinity to your company, it's something to go after. The key there is just knowing who you hire, taking all your past experience, and triangulating that with the new data that we have. So thank you for waiting till the end. Here's how you can get your talent pool reports. Any attendees at Talent Connect can go to the Insights booth on level 2. They're all back there right now, so they'll have to run back to the booth to catch the wave of people, I'm sure, who are going to crush the booth. After Talent Connect, you can contact your LinkedIn representative to get any of these talent pool reports. And then we've uploaded 20 to SlideShare. It's actually non-trivial, once you have these 4,700 reports, to put them in a searchable fashion for everyone to find out which ones we have, and we're constantly updating that list as well. So to add context, again, we're hoping that you'll go to your LinkedIn representative, have that conversation about the audiences that are important to you, get the reports, and set your talent destination. I also just like this. So, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. Blaze a new trail with data. With that, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, and we'll take questions as well. And sure, questions. I think there's a mic over there. Okay.
Just project.
Sure.
I'm curious if you thought about cutting the data by, say, diversity. So with male, female, different populations, I'm sure everyone's really interested in that information too. And I find that that's one of the hardest things to calculate. How many female engineers are graduating every year? What's a realistic benchmark for us?
Yeah, no, that's great. We actually have a running list of what are the next thing. Can you repeat it? Oh, yeah, great. So her question was, could we add factors like diversity or gender to the talent pool reports. And actually, we have a list, a wish list of all the things that we want to add. There's finite space in a 2-page report, so we've kind of prioritized the ones that we've heard most from customers. But that's definitely...
You guys have done some stuff for female engineers, right, or female software engineers, right? I think there's some of that. But yeah, I mean, it's stuff that doesn't show up in LinkedIn Recruiter, right? There's no facets for that, although some of us might wish to have that, right? But yeah, that's some serious data and text mining right there to do that.
Yeah. Anyone else who has a facet that they're kind of interested in, they use on a regular basis that you would want to see added to these talent pool reports? This is your chance.
I have one.
Sure.
More on, you mentioned on the Bay Area, like as we know, there's a really big segment of the Bay Area. There's a huge area, there's Brent, there's East Bay, there's South Bay, so.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Questions are just as important as answers. Let's hear it.
I think a question that I think we have especially is like looking at the Bay Area specifically, so I'm with Macy's.com, is really looking at the different areas of the Bay. So like obviously East Bay versus South Bay versus, the San Francisco proper. It's such a massive area that often when you're recruiting somebody, you go, oh, hey, I have an opportunity in San Francisco, but they're out in Dublin, but they're still technically the Bay Area. So anything like that you guys are looking at in terms of breaking it down or helping it to kind of narrow it down more would be great.
That's interesting. Especially for those highly in-demand regions or countries. That's a good point. And we do have some level of that data, right? That's hot mic.
And you'll just have to do it in Recruiter too, right? I mean, you can probably get a good one with some retail in there and some other things, and just dial it in with the zip code maybe, and just do your own kind of zip code bullseyes.
Did you say that the demand data is based on the number of in-mails being sent in that job category?
Correct.
Will you be changing that to, now that you're doing job wrapping around the world, all jobs, will you be using the job wrapping limited listings to pull that data?
Yes. Yeah, so that's new data coming online, right? So we've structured all the data for in-mail demand, and I think that's a great idea, something that we're definitely looking into.
And as far as then the supply data, do you do anything to offset where, a certain segment is maybe underrepresented on LinkedIn? So like doctors is like a percentage of doctors on LinkedIn versus, say, sales reps. Are you doing any sort of offset there?
Right now, it's just straight up counts of people who are on LinkedIn. So these are completely reflective of the audiences that are on LinkedIn and the activity that's happening, the demand activity that's happening around those audiences on LinkedIn.
That's where you can add value with your own context, right? And knowing kind of what that specific kind of, what would you call it? I mean, just the rate of presence on LinkedIn, right? So that's where the secret sauce is, man. You got to protect that stuff.
Great. Oh, yeah, go ahead. Sure. Oh, it was actually kind of haphazard. It's U.S., so no, I shouldn't say it's haphazard. It's based on some of the most popular recruiter searches again, just for U.S. For Talent Connect London. I'm sure we'll put some more up on SlideShare.
Well, randomized instead of haphazard.
Yeah, they're a random sampling.
Hey, Matt, do you have...
What? There's two Matts.
Grew?
Which Matt? Grew. I never tried the voice actually. Then next time.
So you gave that hypothetical example where you're looking for, let's say, software developers in New York, and you start to go after Chicago, which is high demand. Do you have data around where folks are moving to, let's say, to counterbalance that and understand what's the likelihood of the people who are leaving Chicago when they're coming to New York or other geographies?
That's a great point. So as a follow-on to some of the other facets that people have asked about, migration patterns is one of those. And again, we've got a fixed amount of space right now in the 2-page report, but that's another one that's on our list.
Yeah, and a lot of it's also, to the other side, is how strong is your magnet, right? How strong is your talent brand, right? And if you've got a good one and there's a high supply, then you might as well go, right? You might as well go in and kind of go toe-to-toe with everyone else there. But if you feel like maybe you need a little bit more space to go get those folks, you might want to then go into a lower demand type of spot as well, right? So there's layers and layers of strategic things you can do.
You can imagine a profile where we say New York, which cities are people most likely to move to New York from, right? And if there's connections there, if big city people, a lot of people go between San Francisco and New York. Are there other hidden gems where people will move then to a bigger city? Or between smaller, mid-sized cities, if that's what they like.
Years of experience would be another nice facet, but that's not my question.
Okay. I'll put it on the list, though.
So the ability to categorize people the way you're doing, is it possible to also be able to tag companies in different ways than the industry categories you're using? Because I have different sets of companies that I would like to be categorizing and comparing the people.
Interesting. We do have on the back end, we know who, we can automatically pick or try to discern who the competitors are of your company, right? So maybe that, we haven't productionized that in any way to surface it to other people, but we do have a way by looking at talent flows and profile views, other activities on LinkedIn to know that those companies are connected if you have a lot of people who used to work for a company and then went to another. So we have those groupings. Is that the type of grouping that you're looking at or looking for?
I mean, there are a lot of top industry lists. Mm-hmm. You could be easily gathering that data and pulling it in too, I would think.
Gotcha. So your question, the top industries from what perspective?
Well, let's say if I wanted just the top Microsoft solution partners as opposed to other kinds of developers,
Gotcha.
Development firms.
And maybe instead of one of these talent pools, maybe you could just do a, kind of the LinkedIn recruiter hack of basically building your own industry list and a custom filter, right, and just using that every time, right? So yeah, there's always other ways, but yeah. Basically, what we need is the real-time, on-demand, build your own talent pool, right? So that's for next year.
Siri, yeah. So that's the next thing. That's what we're working on now is having Siri for talent pools and talent GPS. Sure.
In the future, sometime will you incorporate like candidate behavior? So what type of articles the candidates may be reading, where they're hanging out on LinkedIn, kind of help us to bait and attract from that perspective?
Also another forward thinker. So again, looking at the talent drivers, you're getting more into the psychology of this talent pool audience, and I think that's great. You could look at most articles that have been most popular over the past X number of days.
Let's talk at the reception.
Yeah, I think there will probably be some other sessions at Talent Connect that are going to touch on that fact, and that's something that I think, again, is on our list. So we got a lot of great stuff this year. We'll have even more next year. Sure. Right now, that's a great question. I haven't thought about that. So typically, we refresh them on a yearly basis. Now that it's all the machines who are doing the work, we could possibly do it more often. Right now, we're just focused on Talent Connect, but it's interesting. All right, Anil, the expert in the back, said it's going to be monthly, so you'll get it monthly.
All right.
Cool. All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
really
everybody.
appreciate it.